At 34, I'm Monica, a successful journalist at a top fashion magazine and a well-known fashion blogger. As I sit in my office, surrounded by racks of designer clothes and stacks of glossy magazines, I can't help but feel a sense of pride. I've worked hard to get here, and every late night and early morning has been worth it. My phone buzzes with a notification. It's an email from my editor. "Monica, great job on the latest piece. The readers are loving it. Keep it up." I smile to myself. This is what I live for, the rush of creating content that resonates with people, the thrill of being at the forefront of fashion trends. But it wasn't always like this. My mind drifts back to my childhood, to the house where I grew up. It was a nice house in the suburbs, but for me, it was more of a battlefield than a home. My sister, Sarah, is 7 years older than me. From the day I was born, she saw me as competition. I remember her constant need for attention, her jealousy, her manipulations. It's funny how some wounds never truly heal, even after all these years. There was this one time, when I was about 8. Sarah was 15 and had invited her friends over. I was in my room, reading a fashion magazine. Suddenly, I heard a crash from downstairs. My heart sank. I knew, somehow, that this wouldn't end well for me. I crept down the stairs to find my mother's favorite vase in pieces on the floor. Sarah and her friends were standing around it, looking guilty. But then Sarah's eyes locked with mine, and I saw a familiar glint in them. "Monica," she shrieked. "What have you done?" I stood there, mouth agape, as Sarah spun a tale of how I had been running wild through the house and knocked over the vase. Her friends, not wanting to get in trouble, nodded along. But I didn't, I started to say, but my parents had already made up their minds. "Monica, how could you be so careless?" my mother scolded. "You know how much I loved that vase." "You're grounded for a month," my father added. "And no pocket money until you've paid for a new vase." That night, as I lay in bed, I made a promise to myself. One day, I'd have my own place, my own life, far away from Sarah's shadow. And here I am now, living that promise. I've got my own house, bought with a mortgage I'm proud to pay off each month. It's my sanctuary, my piece of peace and quiet. As I wrap up my latest article on fall fashion trends, my mind wanders back to the day Sarah got married. I was 15, and I remember feeling an overwhelming sense of relief. Finally, I thought, I'd have some peace in my life. The wedding itself was a lavish affair. Sarah looked stunning in her white gown, but I couldn't help noticing the smug look she threw my way during the ceremony. A year after the wedding, Sarah had a daughter, my niece, Lily. As she grew, I found myself spending more and more time with her. Sarah seemed all too happy to pawn her off on me, preferring to spend her time gossiping with friends or scrolling endlessly on her phone. "Monica, can you take Lily this weekend?" Sarah's voice crackled through the phone. It was a familiar request. "I've got plans." I sighed, knowing full well that plans probably meant another meeting with chatty friends. "Sure, Sarah. I'd love to spend time with Lily." That weekend, I took Lily to a new children's entertainment complex that had just opened up in town. Her eyes lit up as we entered, taking in the colorful play areas and exciting activities. "Aunt Monica, look," Lily squealed, pointing at a giant slide. "Can we go on that?" I laughed, her excitement infectious. "Of course we can, sweetie. We can do whatever you want today." As I dropped Lily off at home that evening, I overheard Sarah arguing with her husband, Mason. Their voices were muffled, but I caught snippets about Sarah's frequent absences and her disinterest in family life. I quickly ushered Lily inside, not wanting her to hear the argument. But as I turned to leave, Mason caught my arm. "Monica," he said, his voice strained. "I don't know what to do anymore. Sarah's never home, and when she is, she's glued to her phone. It's like Lily and I don't even exist to her." "I'm sorry," I said, not knowing what else to say. "If there's anything I can do to help with Lily, just let me know." He nodded gratefully, and I left, feeling a mix of emotions. Anger at Sarah for neglecting her family, worry for Lily, and a strange sense of vindication. All those years of Sarah tormenting me, and now her true colors were showing to everyone else too. The day everything fell apart started like any other. I was at a cafe with my friends when my phone rang. It was my mother, her voice tense and brittle. "Monica, you need to come home. Now." I arrived at my parents' house to find chaos. Sarah was sobbing on the couch, mascara streaking down her face. My father was pacing, red-faced with anger. And in the corner, looking shell-shocked, was Sarah's husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, as I would learn. "He caught me," Sarah wailed between sobs. With her lover," Mason spat out. "In our own bed." I stood there, stunned. Despite knowing about Sarah's indiscretions, seeing the fallout was something else entirely. And then, as always, Sarah's eyes locked onto me. "This is your fault," she shrieked, pointing an accusing finger. "If you hadn't been so perfect, if you hadn't taken up so much of Mom and Dad's attention, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere for love." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Even now, faced with the consequences of her own actions, Sarah was trying to blame me. "That's enough, Sarah," I said, my voice cold. "You made your choices. Don't you dare try to pin this on me." My parents, predictably, rushed to Sarah's defense. "Monica, how can you be so heartless?" my mother cried. "Your sister is hurting." I looked at them, these people who had always taken Sarah's side, who had never believed me when I told them about her cruelty. In that moment, I made a decision that would change the course of my life. "I'm done," I said quietly. "I'm done with the drama, the accusations, the constant favoritism. I'm moving out." My parents protested, but their words fell on deaf ears. I was 22, fresh out of college, and ready to start my own life. Within a week, I had found a small apartment across town and moved out of my childhood home. The next few years were a whirlwind. I landed an entry-level job at a fashion magazine, throwing myself into work with a passion born of determination to succeed on my own terms. Nights were spent poring over fashion blogs, learning everything I could about the industry. All the while, I kept my distance from my family. Sarah and Lily had moved back in with our parents, but I tried to go there as little as possible. Still, I made an effort to stay in touch with Lily. We'd meet for ice cream or trips to the park, away from the watchful eyes of Sarah and my parents. Lily was growing into a sweet, thoughtful girl, so different from her mother that it sometimes took my breath away. As the years rolled by, my career took off like a rocket. At 34, I found myself in a position I'd only dreamed of as a fresh-faced college graduate. Senior journalist at a top fashion magazine, my byline recognized by industry insiders and fashion enthusiasts alike. But that wasn't all. I'd also cultivated a significant following as a fashion blogger, my social media filled with outfit ideas, trend forecasts, and behind-the-scenes peeks at the glamorous world of high fashion. My phone buzzed with a notification. Another 1,000 followers on Instagram. I smiled to myself, remembering the days when I'd celebrate each new follower like a personal victory. As I flipped through the glossy photos, my mind wandered to my own wardrobe. I'd come a long way from the hand-me-downs and bargain bin finds of my youth. Now, my closet was filled with designer pieces, each one carefully chosen to reflect my personal style and the image I wanted to project to the world. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Lily, now a teenager. "Aunt Monica, can you help me pick an outfit for my friend's birthday party this weekend?" I smiled, warmth filling my chest. Despite the distance I'd put between myself and Sarah, Lily and I had managed to maintain a close relationship. She'd inherited my love for fashion, and I relished every opportunity to share that passion with her. "Of course, sweetie," I texted back. "Why don't you come over on Saturday morning and we'll put something together?" Sarah. The thought of my sister still brought a twinge of discomfort. We barely spoke these days, our interactions limited to terse exchanges at family gatherings I couldn't avoid. She was still living with our parents, still playing the role of the wronged woman, still using Lily as a pawn in her games. But I refused to let thoughts of Sarah dampen my mood. I had too much to be grateful for, too much to look forward to. My career was thriving, I had a beautiful home that I'd bought with my own hard-earned money, I had Alex, my fiancé, and I was finally, truly happy. As I scrolled through the latest runway looks on my tablet, my phone rang. Sarah's name flashed on the screen, and I sighed, bracing myself for what was to come. Monica, Sarah's voice was sharp, demanding. Lily needs a new outfit for her school dance. Something designer, obviously. Just make sure it's expensive and trendy. Lily needs to look better than those other girls. Before I could respond, she hung up. I stared at the phone, a mix of anger and resignation washing over me. How had I become responsible for dressing my niece? Despite my frustration with Sarah, I couldn't help but feel excited about shopping for Lily. At 15, she was developing her own sense of style, and I loved helping her explore that. The next day, Lily and I hit the mall. We spent hours trying on dresses, giggling over some of the more outrageous designs. In the end, we settled on a beautiful emerald green dress that made Lily's eyes sparkle. As we left the store, bags in hand, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of resentment. I loved spoiling Lily, but Sarah's expectation that I would foot the bill for all of Lily's clothing needs was becoming too much. A week later, I found myself at my parents' house for a family dinner. The tension was palpable as soon as I walked in. Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence, Sarah sneered from her spot on the couch, phone in hand as usual. I ignored her, focusing instead on Lily, who ran to give me a hug. Aunt Monica, I wore the dress to the dance. Everyone loved it. That's wonderful, sweetheart, I smiled, genuinely happy for her. My mother's voice cut through the moment. Monica, don't you think it's a bit much? Buying such expensive clothes for Lily when your sister is struggling? I blinked, taken aback. Excuse me? My father chimed in, his tone disapproving. You're always dressed in designer clothes, driving that fancy car. Don't you think you could help out your family more? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Help out? I've been buying all of Lily's clothes for years now. Sarah hasn't spent a dime on her daughter's wardrobe and I don't know how long. Sarah's face twisted into a scowl. Oh, so now you're going to throw that in my face? Some of us don't have cushy jobs writing about shoes all day. I stood there, stunned into silence. How could they not see the truth? How could they still be taking Sarah's side after all these years? As I drove home that night, tears of frustration stinging my eyes, I realized that some things would never change. No matter how successful I became, no matter how much I did for Lily, in my family's eyes, I would always be the selfish one, the one who needed to do more. However, there was something else in my life, besides a good job and a terrible family. My fiancé. 2 years had flown by since I met Alex. When he proposed on a quiet evening at home, I didn't hesitate to say yes. As a fashion journalist, I knew the importance of the perfect wedding dress. I reached out to a young Italian designer I'd featured in one of my articles. His avant-garde approach to bridal wear had caught my eye, and I knew he could create something truly special. When the dress arrived, my hands shook as I unzipped the garment bag. The moment I saw it, my breath caught in my throat. It was perfect, a delicate peach color that complemented my skin tone, with intricate lace detailing and strategically placed rhinestones that caught the light beautifully. I slipped it on, my heart pounding. As I looked in the mirror, I knew this was it. The dress hugged my curves in all the right places, the color making me look radiant. I felt like a bride, like the successful, confident woman I'd become. Without thinking, I snapped a picture and sent it to Sarah. Despite our differences, she was still my sister, and some small part of me hoped she'd be happy for me. Got my wedding dress, I texted along with the photo. What do you think? Her response was typically Sarah. Bit much, isn't it? You always did like to show off. I sighed, putting my phone away. I don't know why I expected anything different. Carefully, I hung the dress in my closet, already dreaming of the day I'd walk down the aisle in it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of wedding preparations. Between finalizing the guest list, choosing a venue, and keeping up with my work, I barely had time to breathe, let alone visit my family. One evening, as I was going over seating arrangements, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Monica, we haven't seen you in weeks," she said, her tone accusatory. "Lily's been asking about you." Guilt washed over me. In all the wedding chaos, I'd neglected my relationship with Lily. "I'm sorry, Mom. Things have been crazy with the wedding planning." About that, my mother's voice took on a familiar disapproving tone. "How much are you spending on this wedding? You know, a modest ceremony would be just as meaningful." I frowned. "Mom, I don't think that's any of your business." "Of course it is," she exclaimed. "We're your family. And speaking of family, have you thought about how you could help your sister instead of spending all this money on one day?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed anger, "this is my wedding. Alex and I are paying for it ourselves. How we spend our money is our business, not yours, and certainly not Sarah's." "Don't be so selfish, Monica," my mother scolded. "Family should come first." As I hung up the phone, I felt a mixture of anger and sadness wash over me. Even now, with one of the happiest days of my life approaching, my family couldn't simply be happy for me. Everything always had to revolve around Sarah and her needs. Just as the dust was settling from the wedding dress drama, a new storm was brewing. Lily was graduating high school, and with graduation came the inevitable school ball. My phone rang one afternoon while I was in the middle of a photo shoot. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. "Monica," Sarah's voice was demanding as ever. "Lily needs a dress for her graduation ball. I want you to buy her one from that new collection by, what's his name? The famous one you're always going on about." I knew exactly which designer she meant, and exactly how much his dresses cost. "Sarah, those dresses are incredibly expensive. We're talking thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars. I'm not spending that kind of money on a dress Lily will wear once. It's not reasonable." "Fine," Sarah spat. "I'll tell Mom and Dad how greedy you're being. Don't bother calling Lily anymore." She hung up, leaving me standing in the middle of the studio, shaking with anger and frustration. True to her word, my parents called later that day, berating me for my selfishness and lack of family values. After a sleepless night, I came up with a solution. I called Lily, hoping she would answer, despite her mother's threats. "Lily, sweetie," I said, relieved to hear her voice. "I have an idea about your graduation dress. Why don't you come over and borrow one of mine? I have plenty of designer dresses you could choose from." There was a pause, then Lily's excited voice came through. "Really, Aunt Monica? That would be amazing." I could hear Sarah in the background, asking what was going on. After a moment, Sarah came on the line. "Fine," she said grudgingly. "We'll be over next week." A week later, I was at home, deep in concentration as I finished up an article for the magazine. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find Sarah and Lily. "The dresses are upstairs in the guest room closet," I said, gesturing towards the stairs. "Why don't you two go up and take a look? I just need to finish this article." Sarah nodded curtly and led Lily upstairs. I returned to my computer, immersing myself back in my work. It seemed like only minutes had passed when I heard them coming back down. "That was fast," I said, surprised. "Did you find something you liked, Lily?" But before Lily could answer, Sarah was hurrying her out the door. "We need to go," she said abruptly. "Thanks for this." A few days after Sarah and Lily's strange visit, I decided to try on my wedding dress again. With all the family drama, I needed a reminder of the joy that was to come. I opened my closet, reached for the garment bag, and it wasn't there. Panic set in as I searched frantically through my entire wardrobe. The beautiful peach dress was nowhere to be found. And then it hit me, Sarah and Lily's hasty departure, their refusal to show me what they'd chosen. They hadn't borrowed a dress, they'd stolen my wedding gown. Furious, I drove to my parents' house. I burst through the door without knocking, making a beeline for Lily's room. There, hanging in her closet, was my peach wedding dress. "Lily!" I called out, my voice shaking with anger and disappointment. "How could you do this? Why would you take my wedding dress?" Lily appeared in the doorway, her face pale and eyes wide with shame. Before she could speak, Sarah pushed past her, her face twisted with rage. "How dare you barge in here and accuse my daughter?" Sarah spat. "You're so greedy, you can't even lend a dress to your own niece for her graduation?" I was stunned. "Lend? Sarah, you stole my wedding dress." "This isn't just any dress, it's for my wedding day." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Oh, please, you have plenty of dresses. You're just jealous that Lily will look better in it than you ever could." "Jealous?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Sarah, you're the one who's always been jealous. Of my career, my success." The room fell silent. Then, from behind me, I heard my mother's voice. "Monica, how dare you speak to your sister that way?" I turned to see both my parents standing there, their faces masks of disappointment and anger. "But she stole my wedding dress," I protested. My father shook his head. "Always so selfish, Monica. Can't you think of anyone but yourself for once?" I stood there, feeling like I was drowning. How had this happened? How was I the villain in this story? Without another word, I grabbed my dress and left. The next day, my phone rang. It was Lily. "Aunt Monica, I'm so sorry." Her voice was small, trembling. "I didn't know it was your wedding dress. Mom said, she said you'd want me to have it. We didn't even look at the other dresses. I'm so sorry." My anger melted away. Of course Sarah had manipulated the situation, used Lily as a pawn in her games. "Oh, Lily," I sighed. "It's okay. I understand. How about we go shopping for a new dress?" "Your own dress, not a borrowed one." "Really?" The hope in her voice was palpable. "But I can't afford a nice dress." "Don't worry about that," I said. "But I have a proposal. The dress will be yours, but you'll pay it off in installments. By helping me with my wedding preparations." The day after our phone call, Lily and I hit the stores. It was a day filled with laughter, honest conversations, and a deepening of our bond. We finally settled on a stunning midnight blue gown that made Lily look like a princess. On the night of her graduation, Lily was radiant. As I watched her laughing with her friends, posing for photos, I felt a bittersweet pang. This wonderful young woman had grown up so fast, and I was grateful to be a part of her life. After the ceremony, as we sat in a quiet corner, I took a deep breath. "Lily, there's something I need to tell you." She looked at me, her eyes curious. "I've decided not to invite your mother to my wedding," I said gently. "And I don't think I'll be communicating with her anymore." Lily nodded slowly, surprising me with her calm reaction. "I understand, Aunt Monica. So, does this mean I can't come to the wedding either?" "Oh, no," I exclaimed. "Lily, you're absolutely invited. In fact, I was hoping you'd be one of my bridesmaids." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of wedding preparations, with Lily by my side every step of the way. When my parents found out about my decision to exclude Sarah, they called to inform me that they wouldn't be attending either. To my surprise, I felt more relieved than upset. The day of my wedding arrived, bright and beautiful. As I stood in front of the mirror in my peach dress, Lily helping me with the final touches, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. The ceremony was perfect. Alex's face as I walked down the aisle, the love radiating from our friends and chosen family, Mason's surprising presence, my ex-brother-in-law. It all combined to create a day full of joy and new beginnings. As the reception wound down, Lily approached me, excitement written all over her face. "Aunt Monica, I got into college. In New York. Dad's helping me with the tuition." I hugged her tightly, thrilled for her new adventure. Oh, Lily, that's wonderful. You're going to do great things, I just know it. In the months that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. Lily moved to New York for college, calling me regularly for advice on everything from fashion to study habits. I want to be just like you, Aunt Monica, she'd say, making my heart swell with pride. I threw myself back into my work with renewed passion, my personal life finally free from the drama that had plagued it for so long. Alex was supportive and understanding, a true partner in every sense of the word.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.